Tying up another featherwing streamer today. This is called the Barnes Special. It is a favorite in the Maine region for landlocked salmon and for brook trout. But I was requested by a longtime follower if I would do a video on the Barnes Special because he likes to fish it for smallmouth in the Midwest. So this is the Barnes Special. It's tied a little bit different than certainly than a lot of the Carrie Stevens flies that I've been doing videos on. But if you research and look into a lot of featherwing streamers, it's not all that different. It has a tinsel body and an oval tinsel rib to it. And it's kind of interesting. It's got multiple layers of bucktail underneath it as well, and a nice bright head on it. This is a Barnes Special. I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Barnes Special with my hook and the vise. This is a Partridge CS15 and a size 4. It's a 10x long. I'm going to attach my thread. For thread, I'm starting out with a white UTC 210 Denier. You don't have to do white. You could do black. You can do anything you want in terms of a base layer of thread here, because the body is a tinsel body on this, so you don't have to worry about darkening up any floss. I am grabbing this simply because it is already out. Again, like a lot of these flies, I'm just putting down a base layer of thread here. This helps for the material to grip, and as you'll see, when we apply the body here, it's a Mylar tinsel I'm using. I'm going to put a layer of flex cement all along the thread wraps here and under the body, because Mylar tinsel is great stuff, but there's a lot of memory to it. If you happen to slip while you're tying this stuff in, it's just going to unravel almost all the way back to where you started. As well, if you're fishing one of these flies that has a Mylar, or I should say a tinsel body that's made from Mylar, if you have a fish that snaps that tinsel, it can just all start to come unwrapped. So your fly is essentially no good anymore, possibly. So you put the flex cement on here so that it helps to secure that tinsel down to the hook and not come unraveled. Plus, this has a oval tinsel rib on it, which is partly there to help secure that as well. Now my thread's all the way back to the point of the hook. This is where I'm tying in the tail. For the tail on the Barnes Special, it calls for a jungle cock body feathers. So I have 2 of them that I've plucked out here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to match those up, getting those tips nice and even here. I'm going to match these up like this. I'm going to cut away the majority of the fluff here. And then I'm going to peel away the rest of it. What that will do is it gives me essentially the 2 feathers here for the tail. Now the length on these, the original description was to be about 1.5 times the gap of the hook. So this is a little bit longer. I'm going to peel this back just a little bit, removing some of those lower barbs. Gives me a little bit shorter tail. So that's maybe about 2 gaps. Take a little bit more off. I think now we're just about there. This can be kind of tricky to tie in because the way the 2 racuses here, they kind of cross each other. So take your time with it sometimes what I find is it tends to cant to one side when you tie these in. So take your time. Possibly if it's canting away from you, cant it the other way when you go to tie that in. Don't use a huge amount of thread tension on there. See, that one's just a little bit canted away from me. If I tighten up that thread just a little bit, that will probably get that out of there. But just take your time with it. If it seems to be giving you a little bit of a fit. I also don't mind if the two bits of tail kind of, as you can see here, they go on the outside of the bend of the hook there a little bit. I'm going to actually take this out and slide it down just a little bit. There you go. So just take your time with it. I'm going to trim these a little shorter, and then I'm going to trim one of them even a little shorter. It just gives it a little bit nicer transition here for the tinsel and the rib. So the rib is an oval tinsel. I'm using a Danville oval tinsel in a size 10. You want to make certain you get a nice long length. Usually this is going to be 12 inches, maybe 13 inches, because we're going to tie this in and run this down the length of the body so that it gives us a nice smooth underbody. We don't have any lumps in there. I'm going to actually tie this in a little bit long, and I will cut it back when I get up towards the other end. We're going to put in our tinsel body in 2 layers. So I'm going to attach it up the head of the fly and wrap back 1 layer and then forward on top of the other one. What that does for me is if I have any gaps, well, it does 2 things. It helps to reinforce the tinsel a little bit. If I have any gaps in the 1 layer that I put in, the second layer will cover those up. Now, as I mentioned, as I get up towards the end here, I left this long. It's just easier to, instead of trying to slide this the other way to get your length right here, it's easier for me anyway, to just leave it long and then cut that out. Now I can finish wrapping this down, and I'm right behind where the eye of the hook loops back and is pinched together. That's where I'm at. This is going to be the end of the body. This area up here is going to be the head space. So for the tinsel body, I'm using a number 10. This is a Danville silver and gold Mylar tinsel in a size 10. This you definitely want to make certain that you get a long enough length for, because you're doing 2 layers here. You don't have to be as careful about overlapping on these. Like I said, you want to try edge to edge. If there's a little gap, it's taken care of, but you certainly don't want to run out when you get to the end. So I'm going to cut a little angle off the end of this with the gold side up. I'm going to lay this down on top of the hook shank, gold side up, and that point is just inside the resulting head space on this. I'm going to wrap that in. This will allow me to then, when I start to wrap this in, it flips over to the silver side here. What I can do now is I can put some flex cement. This is just a Dave's flex cement. Flex cement is just a vinyl cement. It has a little bit slower curing time, so I have a little bit longer to work with it. And I'm going to put a layer here on top and then another one on bottom. And I don't necessarily want it dripping off of here, but if it is kind of thick and with that first layer of tinsel, if it's kind of oozing out, I don't mind. And that's simply because it'll ooze out between the wraps and the first layer. The second layer will come along and smooth those out, and that resulting layer will be glued down as well. So with the Flex Cement on, I can now start to wrap in the tinsel. This is going to wrap down edge to edge. Just take your time with it. I lost tension there and it slid around on me. So just take your time with it. I'm going to wrap all the way down and back up, and then I'll apply the rib. Finish off the oval rib here on the underside of this hook. That way it is not getting in the way of the wing when I tie it in. If you're looking for an even smoother body on the Barn Special with that tinsel, or for that matter, any of these flies that have a tinsel body, you can also look to metal tinsel. Traditional metal tinsel is a little easier to work with. It doesn't have the memory in it. It's a little easier to get, the nice edge-to-edge wrap in there. But the tinsel is a little less expensive. It's easier to work, sometimes easier to work with. So I'm going to change over now to my red thread. The Barn Special has a red head on it. Originally in the Joseph Bates book, Fly Tying and Fishing Streamers, it was listed as it mentions it originally had a black head, but somewhere along the way it changed to a red. I'm using a Danville 6/0 in red. I'm going to clean this space up just a little bit here because the wing on this is just some bucktail, yellow hackle, grizzly hackle, and then a collar of white hackle. So I'm going to put some bucktail on here. The interesting thing on this fly, it has two kinds of bucktail. It has I should say two colors. It has a red and it has a white bucktail. And they're very sparse. So I've already processed these. I've got maybe about 10 or a dozen hairs here, and I've already stacked these. Now, any that are kind of going wild, I'm going to go ahead and pull out. I would rather this be just a little on the thin side than too thick and bushy. I'm going to tie this in with the tips of that back to the bend of the hook. Securing that in with a few more wraps, I'll now put the white on top of it. Same thing with the white bucktail. I've got maybe about a dozen hairs here, a little bit more. I'm going to take a few extra out. I would rather this be a little thinner than too thick. Tie that in the same length. Clean up this headspace just a little bit. And then we'll tie in our wing. So the wing on the Barn Special is pretty straightforward. It is a yellow hackle flanked on the outside by a grizzly hackle. There is no cheek on this or shoulder or anything. There is a collar of white hackle. We're going to use some Schlappen here in a second. That would, I guess, kind of go as somewhat of a shoulder. Mine are already prepped, even though this is not a Carrie Stevens fly. I prep these just like I do with the flies that I tie for her, simply because it's easier for me to handle tying these in. If you're going to prep these and not glue them together, and you want to tie all of these in at the same time, you're going to want to cut. You can see all these four rachis right here on each one of these. You want these to line up side by side so that when you lay this down on top here, all of those will wrap in right side by side. I could do that here. I'm just going to go ahead and do it that way and then cut the excess off just to show you what you're looking for is just to have them all nice and side by side on top. When you do that, however, I find that the wings on these tend to kick up a little bit more as opposed to just going nice and flush on the sides, which is my preference. So to that end, I prefer to tie these in side by side, one side at a time. So what I'll do here is after I've got these, the ends of them here all evened up and the tips evened up, I'm going to cut these off so that I have just a little bit of the rachis there as a handle. Then I like to have these actually run down the sides of the body. The butt ends of these, the rachis on these, will all still end up being side by side on the top, but this way this isn't kicked up and it's kind of flush on the side. It's my preference. When it's in the water, I don't know that it's going to make that much of a difference. especially if you're trolling with some of these. I think a lot of the feather just gets flattened down and flows and waves around however it does. Now this wing over here canted outwards a little bit. That's why I have this open gap. So what I want to do is unwrap this. Push this back towards me. You'll notice my hand right here kind of moving and rotating that back towards me a little bit as I wrap that in. That should twist the butt just a little bit to help close this gap up. You can also take your fingernail and just push on that a little bit like this, and that can also help close that gap up a little bit. So I'm going to clean up the head space here just a little bit. I have a hackle that is now going to be wrapped in as a collar. I'm going to bring my thread right back at the end of the head. I'm using some white Schlappen here. You want to just pick a feather that's going to have, like this one would be a fairly good one. It's going to have some long fibers right here. You want them to extend maybe about halfway down the body here. I've already prepped this one. I've just cut away all the unusable fluffy parts right here, or the ones where the barbs are longer than I need. I'm going to take this and I'm going to tie this in right on the side, trapping the base of those barbs right there along with it. This is just going to help anchor the whole thing in. Move my thread forward a little bit. Now I'm going to grab my hackle pliers. I'm going to wrap this in 3, maybe 4 times. Stroking these fibers back, I wet my fingers and stroke these fibers back so I don't lay any of those down in a forward direction. Like I said, I'll get 3, maybe 4 wraps, and I just want to put each wrap in front of the other. It doesn't have to be a real thick, bushy collar. When I come up on this wrap, I'm going to bring my thread right up across the rachis, and then I'm going to pull the rest of the tip, not really pull, I'm just going to move it down, kind of in a 90 degrees direction here. What that does, it'll open up this area a little bit along the head and over that rachis so that I can bind that in a little bit better. Well, at least I'm not wrapping other barbs and everything in. Then I can just, with my scissors, flip that out. Stroking all of these back, I am going to wrap back on top just a little bit here. I got just a few barbs that got trapped down in there. So I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to wrap backwards, and I'm not going to wrap on top of the butt ends, or I should say the base of that collar, but I am going to wrap the thread right tight to it because I want to keep all that cleaned up, covered up, but I don't want to wrap on it kind of laying down those barbs in a rearward direction. I don't mind that they can pop out. You end up with kind of a larger head on this. As long as everything's covered up here, I'm going to go ahead and put in a whip finish. I'm not flattening my thread on this. I'll explain why in a minute. But I'm just going to, at the back here, I'm going to put in a 5 or 6 turn whip finish. I don't want to build this up into a real long head on this fly. If you've been watching any of the streamer videos I've done on the Carrie Stevens flies, you'll know that her flies, at least, did not have glossy heads to them. They generally, she would put some lacquer on there, and that was on more for protection of the threads. Barnes Special, on the other hand, all the ones that I've seen tied, they call for a glossier head. A couple of ways you can do that. One is just using some red thread here. I will come along and put 4 coats of clear lacquer on there to just give it a nice glossy finish. You could also, if you have some red lacquer, you could put a base of red lacquer on there. Head cement's on there just to the fly tight to soak down in there and secure it real well. But I'll put on multiple coats of a clear lacquer just to help protect that. So there is the Barnes Special, a fun and interesting streamer. I think this would be good in warm water circles as well as the cold water where it originated. So I'll probably throw some of these for some smallmouth this summer. That's the Barnes Special. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. But what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.